All right. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the recording. Tammy has already been dropping in the chat. If you're just joining us, she has been dropping in our resources for today and also our PowerPoint presentation. We're going to be getting going here in just a moment. Melissa, are you there?
Good morning. I'm here bright and early before the sunrise.
Right now, we're just seeing your screen that's like all of us see your screen. So I'm sure you'll be presenting here in just a moment.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm presenting. I think you guys are probably more of an expert at this Google Meet than myself. Right now, I'm presenting, so I can't see any of your shining faces. So I don't know if there's a way to, but I'd rather you guys see this as large as possible. So let me go back before we go there. I don't want this on there. Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Melissa Ariano. I know we're going to have a few people joining us here in a few minutes. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this session, Elementary Assessment, Where Are We Now? And this was a collaboration between my department, which is Assessment in Office of Accountability and Reporting, and Curriculum and Instruction. So I was really excited when I saw the participant list because I've been lucky enough to work with many of you guys throughout the years, whether it was when I was teaching or in the past over an assessment. I know many of you are also school test coordinators. So awesome to see you guys again. And if I haven't met you, I look forward to working with you guys again. And then, of course, Jennifer and Tammy are also on from Curriculum and Instruction, and they have been collaborating with me on this session. So, hello.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Jennifer Sears, and I just was going to go ahead and get on and introduce myself. And yes, we have been working with Melissa on this presentation. It was really born out of questions that you guys are plopping into our chat that we have amongst our TLFs and other questions that might have been sent to us within email. It really just started about just asking questions about the progress reports and then a little bit about essential standards and kind of wanting to know how to deal with those. And voila, this session was born. So we were very excited to kind of try and pull something together for you. And hopefully in this session, you're going to get those answers to those hard-pressed questions you've been asking all of this time. And just know if we don't have the answer right now, we will be working on getting those answers back for you. So just follow along and hopefully we answer all your questions today. And we're so pleased to have you here.
Exactly. Thank you, Jennifer. And we really appreciate it for those of you who were able to answer the questions on the form that we sent out. And if you weren't able to, don't worry about it. We're still going to get an opportunity to get feedback from you. So as Jennifer mentioned, we did try to incorporate some of the questions that you've been asking into this session. And then those that we weren't able to answer, I'm going to show you at the end of the presentation a link to a frequently asked questions. All of the questions you guys answered so that you're able to refer back to them. And so also so that we're able to make sure that we've addressed them all if we didn't touch on it in this presentation. So one of the objectives for today is to just really get a sense of where teachers are coming from given the current situation. So namely on remote grading practices, that is one of the focus areas here. So for all of you who were able to kind of share, things that are going well and challenges, we're going to review those. And then really just, again, that focus on essential standards. How are you guys gathering evidence? So we want you guys to walk away with at least a new idea today. And then we are going to touch on the standards-based progress report, making sure that you guys know where to go for resources and that you guys are walking away with some questions answered regarding that SBPR. And then a few assessment resources and an opportunity to answer any questions related to that. And then since this is assessment, where are we now? We definitely want to look at where are we going. So looking at the future and what are we going to do for next sessions.
All right, everyone. Hi, my name is Tammy Gaudette, and just a reminder about some norms to please have your video on. Please mute yourself because we can hear even little things in the background. Please make sure to share your questions and comments, anything in the chat that you have. Be fully present, bring your fear and courage. These engagement norms I really like, you can tell. Bring your messiness and commitment, and speak from experience.
Okay, awesome. Well, I've got the messiness covered since we're here at 7 a.m. Thank you, Tammy. So just taking a quick look at how's it going for all of you guys. And first and foremost, I want to commend all of you guys, whether you're in the classroom or supporting teachers in the classroom. You guys are amazing. So thank you guys so much. And talking about some things that are going really well. So the use of the learning management system. So a lot of people are feeling Google Classroom and Synergy Gradebook. It's also a challenge simultaneously because you guys are learning something new. You're teaching in a completely different way. But as far as assessment goes, it seems like Seesaw has some features that have been especially useful in terms of being able to track that. Google Classroom does sync with Synergy Gradebook. And we're going to get to a few more details about Synergy Gradebook in a few minutes. It looks like some of you guys are having some success assessing students during reading groups. So that's really exciting. iStation and iReady, we will get to that a little bit later, but that sounds like that's been helpful. And I know Stepping Stones has some online assessments that some of you have just discovered, and that's been extremely helpful. There's various ways to test through the learning management systems, and so that's been helpful. Google Forms is one of those ways. I am not familiar with ReadWorks and Prodigy, so maybe I don't know who all's familiar with that, but perhaps we can hear from you guys in just a minute on that. And then some of you guys have even taken it upon yourselves to really go local and start creating some systems and grading practices at the school level. And then teachers just continuing to develop those routines, focusing on social emotional learning. And then small groups is definitely one of the easiest ways to see, but it's also very time consuming and difficult to set up. So I'm going to pause there and see if anybody would like to drop, if they weren't able to participate in the survey or the form, if they would like to just go ahead and drop in the chat a few successes that they're experiencing, or if they want to expand upon any of those. And then Tammy can help out by reading a few of those out, or if anybody wants to unmute and maybe share. Are there some things being dropped in the chat?
No, nothing's gone in the chat.
Well, maybe success for today is just getting some coffee. So I hope to hear from you guys in a few minutes. Okay, so, we do have our share of successes. And
All right, Melissa, there are two things have popped in. The video option on Seesaw, and then enjoying making flip grids.
Awesome. And as a matter of fact, I believe, oh, no, that'll be in Flipgrids are a really awesome way to obtain evidence of students learning. So that'll be on our next slide. But there are definitely some challenges, and we can't move forward without recognizing those. So we just want to acknowledge that, obviously students and even teachers' lack of technology skills. We've been forced into this virtual world. So that's definitely recognized. One major challenge is that some students are just not participating. They're not turning in work. One concern that was brought up was that parents may be helping too much. And so that in turn makes it a little difficult to tell what the student actually knows. Especially our younger students here, they can't even read, much less navigate. So they need a lot of support. I know that their ability to work synchronously is very limited. And then the difference between the work quality is really starting to show. So things that you would typically get in a classroom, they look so much different remotely. Grading consistency is a concern not only across the school, but across the district. And then some schools, they have some assessment tools, whereas others don't have access to that. And that does make it challenging when you're trying to come up with new ideas or you're limited in that way. And then assessing pretty much all content areas, it is a challenge. And then focusing on essential standards. I know that you guys have to be extremely deliberate when you're thinking about planning your lessons and, how do you focus just on those essential pieces? So I know that takes a large amount of planning. And if you guys want to start dropping in a few more challenges, maybe that I haven't mentioned here in the chat, I would love for you to do that at this time. And then some people mentioned that feedback and just like grading in general in this manner is extremely time consuming. And then parents understanding standards-based grading is another issue that you guys are coming across. So anything pop up through the chat?
There was one, it said completed the Unit 1 benchmark, but didn't tell the parents it was an assessment. I find that if parents know that it's an assessment, they are more likely to sit with the kids and help them out, especially the youngers. The standard-based progress report doesn't really reflect our reality. Getting consistent information from admin about what is expected. Parents helping students on assessments, that's a huge challenge, yes. I've done several assessments with kiddos and I had parents helping them. Changing apps on iPads makes it hard, I know. Trying to get a Jamboard on an iPad, I just can't figure out how to help those kids. I understand that one.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing.
And Melissa, also above, there were some other folks that were just kind of giving us more of a background on that ReadWorks. That ReadWorks, it's a free program that links to Google Classroom, and they can assign articles based on the student levels. And it's super easy to differentiate. They can choose types of questions, multiple choice, short answer, or bold. And another shout out to the Seesaw being able to use that voice record option specifically for reading directions to those younger students who are not able to be able to read at this point. And also Prodigy, they mentioned that it also links to Google Classroom and they can assign students assess a number of questions and also give due dates. And there's a placement test that they can use so that they can have some data. It's easy to differentiate as well. So,
well, those are really awesome resources. If you didn't know about those, write it down. Thank you, guys. Okay, so how are you guys currently collecting evidence and tracking learning? Here's a list of ways. We did mention Flipgrid. And as I was reading through the forms, something came up about, authentic assessment. And so many of these are authentic for sure. especially things like Flipgrid, because that's going to really give you some insight into students actually performing a task or being able to explain and show what they know. So that would be an example for sure of an authentic assessment. And then anecdotal notes. So I know with the little ones, you're doing a lot of observation, but just really tracking to see, you know, what are some behaviors that you're seeing. That's helpful. So I'm not going to necessarily go through and read all of these at this moment. I want to make sure that we have time to talk about the report card and a few of the assessment resources. But jot these down. You guys are going to have access to this slide, so you can go back and get a few of these ideas. And then looking into the future, maybe we can explore some of these in depth in the future. So moving on to the standards-based progress report. I'm going to mess up my full screen here, but I'm going to click on this first link here, and Tammy is also going to drop something into the chat that is the reference I'm going to show you. If it would open. I'm actually on a Chromebook right now, so it's kind of slow. So we developed this one-page infographic, and everything that we're going to talk about today, not only are you going to get the slides that we've shared with you, but you're also going to get access to this. And it's just a quick one-page infographic that's going to guide you and provide you with all of the links that we're going to talk about today. So the first one on here is essential standards. Hopefully all of you guys know where the essential standards are located, because you are the advocates of the school, you're the TLFs. And if you don't, no problem. There's a link right here that's going to take you to the CNI page. I think is it the TLN hub? And then this link right here, we're going to be talking about the SBPR, Standards-Based Progress Report. So this link here is going to take you to that area where all of that information is located. We're also going to just touch on iReady, iStation. We'll talk a little bit about the ECOT, and then there's finally some additional tips. So, excuse me, each of these will take you to, they're each a link that will take you to some place that is going to support you and your work with collecting evidence on essential standards. So I will click on the SBPR in just a moment. But first, I wanted to just talk to you guys just a little bit about the SBPR. First and foremost, the report card is going to look the same as it did in the spring. So at the same as it was last year for most of the year. And the reason why leadership did decide that was because this isn't really the time to change. We don't want to throw something completely new on you, on teachers. And so with that, it's going to be the same report card. The rubric is a point in time rubric, and it's going to be based on what's been taught and assessed up until that grading period. So we know that you're not covering as much content. Your focus is on those essential standards. And so you may not be grading as much as you did in the past. You may not grade every single report card row. And we're here to tell you that that's okay. I know there's some concerns about learning gaps as well. And that's something that we're going to have to address throughout the year as we go on and we're adjusting our scope and sequence of our curriculum. That's going to be something that we can continue to address throughout the year. But still, the focus is going to be on grade level standards, and namely those essential standards, which we provided the link for you. Secondly, those very important and finally, those important standards. And so we did realize, there are some remote learning considerations, considering things like students who are not turning in work. So that came up quite a bit in our questions. And if students are not participating or if they're not turning in work, well, we're going to ask that on the report card you submit a mark of NA. So that means not assessed. And so what we're going to have here is if a student's hardly participating, they may have an entire report card that's almost full of NAs. And then the comment section is especially important now more than ever, as well as the conference time, because this is an opportunity to say the reason that the student doesn't have any marks here is because they're not turning in anything. We can't assess where they're at. We can't get a gauge on them. And so I think if a parent sees that, that's going to be extremely telling. And then NA, we added that to the effort marks. And then also for K2, the social and personal development marks. And the reason why is because there are certain behaviors, certain personal characteristics of learning, like the behavioral things that you just can't see. You guys are doing the best you can. And so we wanted to provide that option just so that you wouldn't be stuck. Anyway, just to provide an additional option. And then I am going to pause there in our documents on the SBPR page. There's these documents. I'm trying to point to it. And those will show you which standards, which report. I'm back. That's never happened to you guys, right? Ever.
Never. So they were saying it sounded very important and they really, really wanted to make sure that you repeated that whole last section.
Absolutely. So I had to change computers to my trusty. So now I'm a sunflower, and that's okay. You saw me and you just want to hear what I have to say. So I'm sharing my screen again, opening this up. I don't know how far I got into this before it cut off. Did you guys hear me get through this?
I did.
No, not quite. There were some questions about the K2 component that you were saying that was just recently added.
Okay, no problem. So, well, we added the mark of NA, not only to effort, but to the marks that are used for K2. So social and personal development, those marks at the very end that are before the teacher comments, we added NA to that drop-down menu just in case you weren't able to observe that behavior. So did you guys hear me talk a little bit about the report card and about students who weren't turning in work?
Yes, we did.
Okay, excellent. So were there any questions about the SBPR?
Well, there was a question about the midterm progress reports, about a code that's listed on the back to give students a 0-0 for standards not assessed. Student attendance, they were talking about student attendance as a barrier, and students that produced insufficient amounts of work. Will that code be there on the SBPR as well?
We talked about that, and no. And that 0-0, I'm going to be honest with you, it's a remnant from last year's attempt to transition. And so that code shouldn't even be there. It should be just an NA. And one reason is that we want to separate behavior from learning. I mean, they do go hand in hand. I mean, the student has to be participating and displaying behaviors that are going to help them learn, right? But we want the standards to be graded more purely, so we don't want to make anything punitive in that manner. So an NA is just going to have to suffice, is what people have decided on that.
And then it looks like there might have been some questions about like correlations of assigning standards to like specific line items. I'm not sure if that has to do with like those essential standards, and maybe that person could also unmute and kind of help us with that question. It just said a correlation page assigning standards to line items on SBPR used to be on the CNI website. Is that something that's still available?
So when I talked about these guidance documents down here, and then I showed you guys the resource page, when you click on this, which takes you to the intranet, that is where all of this information is hiding. So the midterm progress report is here. There's all of the training materials that have been used, so directions for how to fill it out. There's blank SBPR forms for each grade in English, Spanish, and then the bilingual. But what the person, and I'm not sure who asked that, but these guidance documents here are the ones that have that correlation between the report card row or line item and the standard. So they're really tiny, so you have to just enlarge this.
They said yes, that was what they were looking for.
Okay, so that's under that link there, and they're called guidance documents. So this is an example of grade 3. So for writing, you can see that this row, for example, assesses both a writing and a language standards, plural. And so that'll kind of help you look at that. And again, we thought about maybe creating something that would highlight those essential standards. At the same time, we don't want to give the message that if you collected evidence on a very important standard, that you shouldn't grade that. So we don't want to send that message. And if there's some essential standards you haven't assessed yet, that's okay too. So we wanted to make it fit based on what you've taught. And then talking a little bit about the rubric, since I have it pulled up, the rubric, like I said, is point in time. So anything that's a 3 is that the student is demonstrating that as you've taught it. To get a 4 would mean that they're already performing the entire standard to mastery, even though you haven't taught that or assessed evidence of that. In-depth understanding. And so that would be the difference between a 3 and a 4. Any questions? The rubric. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going so that we have time to cover all of our slides. So just a quick touch on iReady. For the most, that did come up in the questions. For the most part, APS is using that for general education as a diagnostic, as interim assessment data that supports formative assessment and 90-day plans. K through 8 SPED does use that as part of their entire blended curriculum. It is district supported, it's not mandated. So sometimes people get confused on that. I've listed here what is included in the assessment license that everybody gets. So new this year is tools, the learning games, if you haven't seen those are really cool for the kids. Teacher Toolbox is free this year, and that login is integrated on your home screen. The lessons, SPED has licenses, and any school who's purchased that as an add-on. I know iReady had made them free in the springtime, and some of you might have found those even this fall. And if you did, that's excellent, but they are technically an add-on, so they could send you a bill. I don't know that they would, but they could. One of the biggest things that came up now during beginning of year testing was parents who help the kids. And so we were asked, well, what did we do to help schools understand, and especially parents, why this is not a good idea? So we had a session with the principals where we explained this, helping pass down that message that both iReady and iStation are adaptive, and so they will get more difficult as the student answers well. And so it's really just a communication piece where the teacher is going to have to communicate before the kiddo tests. And I know beginning of year's over, but really that's what it came down to, was helping that parent understand that this isn't a traditional test. These are online tests that adapt to find out what the student knows, and that it's actually okay to get half of them wrong, because that's the formula to determine the student's level. So we did have an increase in reports about students our teachers helping, not teachers, you guys help every day, parents helping, siblings helping on the test. And so there were some requests to retest. If you suspect that they got help and that those results are not valid, well, then by all means, don't use them right now, use other measures. If you feel like this test was helpful and did provide you with some insight into the student's knowledge, well, I would recommend the CCSS performance report. This standards report is new as of January. And so what it does, it actually shows you by your class and by student who has mastered at least one measure of that, right? This is just one measure, but who's mastered that grade level standard. So your infographic has a do that CCSS performance report. And then
Melissa, where
yeah,
is the learning games located?
the learning games, I would have to look, but I want to say I think it's under Assess and Teach.
Sorry, that's actually one I don't know where it is.
I think it's under Assess and Teach. And one thing I would say is, and we're saying it at the end, is we do have some iReady office hours and iReady professional developments and iStation in the month of October. And those were emailed out in your TLN newsletter. And I have a link to those here. So those would be the exact questions if you need to pop in and just figure out, well, what are these learning games? You can find out more at those sessions. Or you can email me. I'll find out for you. And then iStation piece is actually state mandated. The New Mexico PED did make beginning of year optional. iReady beginning of year was optional, but they were highly recommended because even though we knew validity was questionable, we wanted to provide something, some type of formative assessment, because something is definitely better than nothing, right? So that's kind of where we're at. Grades 3 through 5 sometimes use this depending on your school. There is, I know people said something about Seesaw. I don't know if students can record themselves, but there is a free oral reading fluency assessment where students can record themselves reading and teachers can later listen to those. So that's new on iStation, and that's free.
before you move on,
Yeah.
they want to know clarification, is iReady optional?
iReady is optional. I mean, if you think about it though, because it's often used for 90-day plans, that's where it kind of comes into where it's like you have to have something as a school. So if your instructional council doesn't want to use the district supported interim to be able to have data to analyze, then there needs to be another plan. So I mean, completion and participation was down for the beginning of year, and that's okay. We just encouraged people, whoever did not participate had another plan for getting some information about their students. So iStation, we had I know that the application was an issue, having to reinstall it because of an update. It was taken off ClassLink, which was not ideal in the middle of the window. So apologies for that, but it wasn't me. But still, the intent was that it wasn't working the way it needed to through ClassLink, and that it's more consistent when students go directly to the application. So that's why it was taken off ClassLink. There is a standards report in iStation, and so you can see which standards align with each subtest. And then you can see, depending on what their performance level was on that subtest, that gives some alignment with those standards, those grade level standards. So on our infographic, there's a link to that. The
Before you
ECOT,
move on, Melissa, do we still have progress monitoring for iStation iReady this year?
do we have progress monitoring?
Yes.
Yes, it's since the beginning of year was technically optional. They don't have to do it until middle of year. But we would highly recommend that levels 1 and 2 progress monitor each month. I know we're running low on time. Do we have to end right at 7:45?
I think we have a few minutes of grace because we lost you, but I would probably say we need to wrap up in probably the next 5 minutes or so, since the next group will be also on the same Meet code.
Cool, no problem. We've got this. So I did want to just mention the ECOT, which is the early childhood observation tool. Initially, at the beginning of the year, both pre-K and kindergarten were required. The state 2 weeks ago changed their language on their assessment calendar, and so now it's been specified that pre-K is required, kindergarten is only recommended. But I know teachers had really done a lot of work trying to get those observations completed. So anything that they've been able to collect, please have them submit those ratings, even if they don't have every indicator. So it's okay if they don't have that complete record. Please submit all final ratings by October 15th. And then in the infographic, I gave you guys a link to the Early Childhood Guidelines book, which has every single indicator, the rubrics, and most importantly, bringing in those standards. Each of those indicators actually align to a Common Core standard. And so I don't know if a lot of people know that. So that's one way that kindergarten teachers, because I know they don't have as much evidence, can look at those and say, well, this aligns to RI K.2. So that, I don't know if that would really align to any of those, but you get the picture. So looking into the future, resources for supporting essential standards, this is the link to the infographic. So if you could share that with teachers at your school, that would be amazing. Explore that. The frequently asked questions, So this, if you click on that, it's a link to a Google Doc where I've listed all of the questions that came in through the forms. And so if we didn't answer your question today, we're going to make sure that all of those get answered. Again, I mentioned there's professional development sessions for iReady and iStation. There's links to those. The assessment Google site is extremely, in my opinion, because I love assessment, right? Really useful, or talk to your test coordinator if you aren't that person. There were some questions that came up about the New Mexico MESA, the MSSA, and that is essentially the park replacement. So that is coming in the spring. The IMSSA is the interim version of that, and there's only 3 schools that are going to have to concern themselves with the interim assessment, and they are the few K-5 plus schools that we have for this year. The New Mexico ASR is the science assessment, so that'll be for grade 5. And then you guys are the leaders that are helping advocate for teachers' needs. So continue asking for things. I really think that there's a lot of amazing questions that came up from this session that we could build on in the future and work towards common goals around grading and around improving the report card to reflect, your current, well, not only current reality, but just to be improved in general. And so continue to advocate through your instructional council and the union and principals, because we need that. And then here's our information here. You can email us if you have additional questions. And then thank you guys so much for what you do. You guys truly amaze me. And I will stay online here for a few minutes. I think we're going to get people coming in from the next session. And thanks, guys. And I apologize too for cutting off in the middle of that. So thanks for your patience there.
Do we have any last minute questions that anyone has? If you'd like, plop them in the chat or just feel free to unmute yourself. We'll stay on here for a couple minutes. If not, you guys know you will have all of the resources linked on that bit.ly site. There'll also be a survey that you need to make sure you fill out by the end of today with all of the sessions that you have attended so that we can get your feedback. And if this is a session you want to have again, make sure you list that on that survey information so we can attend to that. And looks like there's one question that came in about the KOT, Melissa.
Karen, yeah, you're exactly right. Is this page? The kindergarten is not mandated. So yes, it's not required. You don't have to. But we recommend that anything you've already collected that you submit, because we don't want that to go to waste. That makes sense.
And is it okay to put NA on the observations for those pre-K teachers? Is it acceptable for pre-K teachers or to put NA for observations?
I was told no, and that was from the early childhood manager here in APS that said they could not leave things blank. So I would contact Mary Forelli if the pre-K teacher has additional questions about that. But I think there's obvious, like in my opinion, I think that there would be some that they just couldn't get. And that's where I think they would have to invest in the parents to try to help. You're welcome. Exactly, that interaction piece we're missing. So iStation progress monitoring is typically required for students who score in levels 1 and 2, but they don't have to do it now because beginning of year was optional. But we still encourage it. iReady progress monitoring is required for special education students only. You're welcome.
All right, we'll just hold the floor open for some last minute questions, but we have to be getting off here shortly because I know there'll be other folks popping in here. So can we put NA on the report card if a parent has admitted to helping students with their work?
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean,
Parent.
it's kind of cool. Like it's kind of a good problem to have that they're so overly involved, you know, because we can't be there for them as teachers right now. So I'd rather have that scenario than them not participating at all. So hopefully that transfers over when they get back to school.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.
So we have that. And thank you, Melissa, for joining us and